Amidaji Essays by Gansen John Welch Sensei. Master Shinran Shonen, An Ideal Teacher, Role Model, Guide and Mentor by Gansen John Welch Sensei. As we peer through the ever-increasing gloom, we cannot find much evidence of the light of wisdom, compassion, justice, respect for the laws of nature and ethical behavior, etc., that are essential prerequisites for the establishment and survival of relative civilization, peace, prosperity, and progress. It seems, at the time of writing this essay in February 2021, that we are entering into a new dark age. The most recent dark age in Europe lasted many centuries, so we cannot be overly optimistic about the rapid ending of this present dark age that appears to be our increasingly likely future. Many people, probably a majority on our planet, have lived for most of recorded history under various forms of repressive governments and regimes, ruled by tyrants, kings, emperors, czars, warlords, dictators, etc. The common factor to most of these forms of government, with very rare exceptions, has been the concentration of power, political, military, economic, financial, administrative, etc., in the hands of one person or, at most, very few people relative to the population governed. Thus, many people lived lives where there were no arts, quote, no arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. End quote. And, quote, the condition of man is a condition of war of everyone against everyone. End quote. Such was the brutal reality described by the great English philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who also stated that, quote, the same things in a nature where such things are scarce, all must compete over the same ends, and must constantly seek possession and any power that might be needed in the future competition. End quote. I leave it to the listeners' or readers' knowledge, experience, insight and judgment to decide whether or not our political and other so-called rulers or leaders are leading us into a brighter or darker future. Regardless of our responses or views, we still live in samsara, where we will continue to experience varying degrees of relative heaven and hell until we become fully enlightened Buddhas. I can only give my perspective based on my life experiences, work, study, reading and research over many decades, and living in 2 countries during nearly 63 years in this current life. I will provide a brief summary of a probable future scenario based on past history as well as extrapolating current trends. I will then offer suggestions regarding what can be done to ameliorate the increasing suffering that appears at present to be ever more probable. These suggestions will be based on Amida Dharma and the life of Master Shinran Shonen. There are a very small number of parasites who are plotting and planning the transformation and probable destruction of our current political, economic, social and other systems, structures, etc. To speculate on their motives, etc., is a waste of precious time and energy, given the urgency and magnitude of the potential problems that we face if they succeed in their psychopathic plans. We, the productive majority, must act soon because they plan to replace all or most of us with robots, artificial intelligence, or whatever other technologies that are invented and developed in the future. Time is of the essence, as they know they must implement their plans before a critical mass learns the truth and takes action to stop them. The modern-day psychopathic parasites are using similar tactics and strategies that were utilized by Stalin and Mao Zedong, up to now the 2 worst mass murderers and tyrants in recorded human history. However, there are now new military, psychological, chemical, biological, medical and technological weapons, etc., that were not available to Stalin and Mao, so we face new potential problems, threats and difficulties that will require wise, courageous and creative responses in order to triumph over or even survive this latest attack on freedom, prosperity, progress, peace, liberty and life. Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, published in 1932, and George Orwell in Animal Farm and 1984, published in 1945 and 1949 respectively, are two great dystopian novels dealing with various aspects of the potential problems we are facing currently, or will probably be forced to face in the near future. These two great creative and visionary writers provide another perspective that may help us deal with this dire current and future situation. I will now concentrate on the life and works of Master Shinran Shonin, as his wisdom and experiences in dealing with severe setbacks, challenges and adversity will inspire and motivate us to help ourselves and others to cope with the difficulties and threats that we face currently and in the future. An illustrated biography of Shinran, the Honganji Shonen Shinran Dene, compiled by Kakunyo, with introduction, translation and notes by Zui H. Inugaki, states that, quote, "With the flourishing of the Pure Land teaching, the path of sages dwindled in influence. Enraged scholar monks in Nara and on Mount Hay held Master Genku responsible for this and appealed to the court for his expeditious punishment." End quote. This resulted in the following severe setbacks and difficulties for Master Shinran Shonin, his teacher Master Honen Shonin, and some of Master Honen Shonin's disciples. Quote, "Lords and vassals who opposed the Dharma and justice harbored indignation and bore resentment to the Nembutsu teaching. Thus, Master Genku, the great founder who promulgated the true teaching of the Pure Land Way, and a number of his followers were, without proper investigation of their crime, indiscriminately sentenced to death or, deprived of their priesthood, exiled under criminal names. I was one of them. Hence, I am neither monk nor lay, and so I took Toku as my surname. Master Genku and his disciples spent 5 years in remote provinces in exile. The criminal name of Genku Shonin was Fuji no Motohiko, and the place of his exile was Hata in Tosa province. The criminal name of Shinran Shonin was Fuji no Yoshizane, and the place of his exile was Kokobu in Echigo province. I will not enumerate other disciples' death charges and exiles." End quote. Even though Master Shinran Shonin was eventually pardoned, he continued to stay on to convert country folk. Master Shinran continued to teach and spread the exclusive practice of the Nembutsu in Hitachi province. Although those who doubted and abused it were few, and many accepted it in faith, there was a monk said to be Yamabushi who bore a grudge against the Buddhist teaching Shonin was promulgating, culminating in an attempt to kill him. Thus he was seeking an opportunity to realize this. Despite trying many times, Yamabushi failed to kill Master Shinran, and finally he visited Master Shinran at his hermitage, but again could not carry out his murderous intention. Yamabushi confessed to Shonin the grudge that he had entertained against him. Shonin, however, did not appear surprised. The Yamabushi broke his bow and arrows on the spot, threw away his sword and stick, cast away his hood, and took off his persimmon robe. As a result of this transformation, he thus took refuge in the true Buddhist teaching, and finally fulfilled his aspiration for birth in the Pure Land. What a wonderful thing! He was later known as Mahebo. This is the name given to him by Shonin. We can see from these adverse events in Master Shinran's life that he did not give way to despair, depression or defeat. Instead, he continued to teach, explain and elucidate Amida Dharma with particular emphasis on the primal or 18th vow of Amida Buddha. We can do no better than to try our best to follow Master Shinran's inspiring example when we are faced with adversity in all its many and varied manifestations. We can also help and inspire others to the best of our abilities to read, listen to and understand Amida Dharma. If our best efforts fail to adequately clarify and explain Amida Dharma, then we can encourage people to become students of excellent and genuine teachers of Amida Dharma, such as Reverend Joshua Adrian Celia. Joshua has written an excellent article, which I strongly recommend, about Master Shinran, and the link is provided in the PDF of this essay. it reinforces my and many others' experience of Master Shinran's beneficial impact through his unsurpassed words of wisdom and compassion. I, like many others, have derived great benefit from listening to and reading the teachings of Master Shinran, and I will conclude this essay by quoting some of my favorite passages from his works. I hope that many readers and listeners will find these passages to be helpful, beneficial, and inspiring in coping with the unending difficulties of unenlightened life in samsara. These wonderful words of wisdom written by Master Shinran were carefully chosen with the intention of helping the reader or listener to realize the necessity of entrusting your karmic destiny to Amida and his great grace and salvation, because we are completely incapable of freeing ourselves from samsara in this age of dharma decline with self-power practices. The passages quoted below were selected from Tanisho, a record in Lament of Divergences by Yenbo, a student or disciple of Master Shinran. I highly recommend The Path of Acceptance, Commentary on Tanisho by Reverend Joshua Adrian Celia, as this book explains and clarifies all the important teachings of Master Shinran, as recorded and discussed by Yenbo. Quote, saved by the inconceivable working of Amida's vow, I shall realize birth in the Pure Land. End quote. The moment you entrust yourself thus to the vow, so that the mind set upon saying the Nembutsu arises within you, you are immediately brought to share in the benefit of being grasped by Amida, never to be abandoned. Know that the primal vow of Amida makes no distinction between people young and old, good and evil. Only Shinjin is essential, for it is the vow to save the person whose karmic evil is deep and grave, and whose blind passions abound. Thus, for those who entrust themselves to the primal vow, no good acts are required, because no good surpasses the Nembutsu, nor need they despair of the evil they commit, for no evil can obstruct the working of Amida's primal vow. End quote. Quote, even a good person attains birth in the Pure Land, so it goes without saying that an evil person will. End quote. Though it is so, people commonly say, even an evil person attains birth, so it goes without saying that a good person will. This statement may seem well-founded at first, but it runs counter to the intent of the primal vow, which is other power. This is because people who rely on doing good through their self-power fail to entrust themselves wholeheartedly to other power, and therefore not in accord with the Amida's primal vow. But when they overturn the mind of self-power and entrust themselves to other power, they will attain birth in the true and fulfilled land. It is impossible for us who are possessed of blind passions to free ourselves from birth and death through any practice whatsoever. Sorrowing at this, Amida made the vow, the essential intent of which is the evil person's attainment of Buddhahood. Hence, evil persons who entrust themselves to other power are precisely the ones who possess the true cause of birth. End quote. Concerning compassion, there is a difference between the path of sages and the Pure Land path. Compassion in the path of sages is to pity, commiserate with, and to care for beings. It is extremely difficult, however, to accomplish the saving of others just as one wishes. Compassion in the Pure Land path should be understood as first attaining Buddhahood quickly through saying the Nembutsu, and, with the mind of great love and compassion, freely benefiting sentient beings as one wishes. However much love and pity we may feel in our present lives, it is hard to save others as we wish. Hence, such compassion remains unfulfilled. Only the saying of the Nembutsu, then, is the mind of great compassion that is thoroughgoing. Quote, the Nembutsu is the single path free of hindrances. Why is this? To practitioners who have realized Shinjin, the gods of the heavens and earth bow in homage, and Maras and non-Buddhists present no obstruction. No evil act can bring about karmic results, nor can any good act equal the Nembutsu. End quote. Quote, knowing that every evil act done, even as slight as a particle on the tip of strand of rabbit's fur or sheep's wool, has its cause in past karma. End quote. Quote, by this you should realize that if we could always act as we wish, then I told you to kill 1,000 people in order to attain birth, you should have immediately done so. But since you lack the karmic cause inducing you to kill even a single person, you do not kill. It is not that you do not kill because your heart is good. In the same way, a person may not wish to harm anyone and yet end up killing 100 or 1,000 people." End quote. Quote, "If it were only by observing precepts and upholding rules that we should entrust ourselves to the primal vow, how could we ever gain freedom from birth and death?" End quote. Quote, "When I consider deeply the vow of Amida, which arose from 5 kalpas of profound thought, I realize that it was entirely for the sake of myself alone. Then how I am fulfilled with gratitude for the primal vow, in which Amida resolved to save me, though I am burdened with such heavy karma." Reflecting once more on this expression of Shinran's inmost thoughts, I find that it does not differ in the least from those precious words of Shantao. Quote, "Know yourself to be a foolish being of karmic evil, caught in birth and death, ever sinking and ever wandering in transmigration from innumerable kalpas in the past, with never a condition that would lead to emancipation. I know nothing at all of good or evil, for if I could know thoroughly, as Amida Tathagata knows, that an act was good, then I would know good. If I could know thoroughly, as the Tathagata knows, that an act was evil, then I would know evil. But with a foolish being full of blind passion, in this fleeting world, this burning house, all matters without exception are empty and false, totally without truth and sincerity. The Nembutsu alone is true and real." End quote. From the postscript. Namo Amida Bu.